on this week's episode of In the Suite with Tina Powell.
People ask me, do I have any regrets in my career? And I will always tell you, my biggest regret is that I didn't do this earlier, right? For a variety of reasons, I just didn't realize I could have done this and been successful at it. Most women don't realize how much power they have in being proactive with their decisions. So I think for anyone out there who's thinking of working with an advisor, it should be someone who can help you very holistically.
Hi, this is Tina Powell, host of In the Suite, where I sit down with top women leaders and some of the biggest names in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Together, we'll discover some of their best secrets and top strategies to grow great business, build a strong brand, and lead teams in the 21st century. I hope you'll enjoy hearing their amazing personal stories of triumph, trepidation, and transformation in hopes of becoming better leaders ourselves. The time for you to lead is now, and you're in the suite. Today's conversation in the suite is about extraordinary journeys with Megan Gorman. Megan is the founder and managing partner at Chequers Financial Management, a female-owned, high-net-worth tax and financial planning firm in San Francisco, California, started nearly 8 years ago. Megan's financial career began when she took her first tax class at Rutgers Law School after earning a BS in history from Bryn Mawr College and studying in London. Her insatiable curiosity and passion for exploring financial issues through the lens of psychology, culture, and history has spawned a specialization in tax planning and a firm with a single premise: to establish long-term lasting relationships to best serve the needs of high net worth individuals and families. Driven by this passion, Megan spent almost 20 years advising wealthy families on navigating their financial lives in her roles at Goldman Sachs and BNY Mellon Wealth Management before starting Chequers. The name Chequers Financial Management has special significance you'll discover about 15 minutes into our conversation, and derives its meaning from the UK, the second home of the UK Prime Minister, who is now Rishi Sunak. Megan is a deep thinker, and her efforts have earned her the distinction of being named to Forbes' 2022 list of America's top women wealth advisors. She's also a senior contributor at Forbes, writing on the intersections of her passions: tax, finance, retirement, and estate planning. She's frequently quoted in the prominent financial media outlets, including Washington Post, CNN, The Wall Street Journal, and more. You can also hear Megan on the Money Tree Investing podcast panel discussing trending topics in the investment world. In addition to everything else that she's doing, she's recently joined the advisory board of Sway Media, and her other engagements include Schwab Impact, Tory Burch Financial, Chief and Better Place Forest. Just wow. In fact, one of the many gifts that you'll discover about Megan Gorman in this episode is her unmistakable passion for problem solving and bold entrepreneurial journeys. As an adjunct law professor at Golden Gate School of Law and the author of www.thewealthintersection.com, she shares sound advice on taking control of our taxes and finances in the present and planning for a future destiny in the suite. Wow, Megan Gorman, take a seat in the suite. It is so exciting to see you here today. I'm really, really fired up. We're going to have a great discussion.
Tina, I'm thrilled to be here. And I've had a couple of people I know quite well on your show recently, from Kathy Curtis to Sonia. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. It's really truly an honor. I know that you are in the middle of lots of things. We're going to be talking about tax. We're going to be talking about career development. We are going to be talking about building a personal brand, thought leadership, all of these things that I look at you, Megan, and you have a lot of great qualities, and you are also someone that other advisors aspire to be. You have a very strong personal brand and presence, and I want to be able to talk about that. So yeah, congratulations to our friends Sonia Dreisler and Liv Gagnon also for their launch this week. Saw that on your Twitter as well.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great idea. And sometimes the best ideas are the most simplest, obvious ones. And it made me think, why hadn't anyone done this before? But leave it to Sonia and Liv to put that together. So I'm excited to see where Choir goes.
And we share also too Kathy Curtis. We love Kathy Curtis. Big fan.
I know. Yeah, she's great. She's great. And what she does with women is really, really needed in the space. I feel like her approach and how she interacts with her clients. And actually, when we met for lunch recently, and she talked to me so much about how much she cares about her clients. Mm-hmm. And I love hearing that because, I mean, at the end of the day, servicing the client, providing the right type of advice and guidance, that's where the passion is at. And for me, it's always been what I've focused on is working with clients and making them feel safe as they navigate all these financial decisions.
So let's talk about that. You also, too, like Kathy, you do incredible work with women. And you put out a lot of content, a lot of thought leadership out there. You're also a professor. So all these other things that we're going to get to, but you do have your own wealth and management consulting firm that you started in 2015 called Chequers Financial Management. You are headquartered in San Francisco. So we would love for you to tell us about it.
Yeah, it's funny because we're about to turn 7 and it's amazing. I'm like, this has been flying by. But I think the thing is, I think my story is probably very common with a lot of other people's stories, right? I got out of law school. I got recruited by a firm that worked with corporate executives, a firm called ACO, which is owned by Goldman Sachs today. And I was there for 12 years. Then I went to BNY Mellon for 2 years, but I was at that point where I wanted to do it my way, right? I used to talk about this fictional firm to my husband. And finally he looked at me, he's like, you're going to be 40 soon. Are you going to get on this? And it was interesting because it was like, well, I should probably do this. And so I launched my firm 7 years ago, but really focusing on the things that are important to me. And that is client servicing and being really technical with clients. So it's funny because my husband will look at me sometimes. He's like, I can't believe people call you for the reasons they call you. But part of what I've wanted to be in being in the space is not just be an investment person or a tax person or an estate planning person, because there's a tendency in the industry that you get siloed into a sphere, right? But I love the idea of being able to sort of scuba dive in all the spaces, because to me, it all ties together. And so launched the firm 7 years ago. We've grown. We have 12 people here, a fully built out tax department, a fully built out investment team, bookkeeping, bill pay, you name it. We do it because we work with the high net worth and ultra high net worth group, which is a complex type of clientele to be working with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by entrepreneurship. When you started your firm 7 years ago, congratulations on that 7th anniversary. We're about to hit the 5th one. And I got to tell you, it's like riding in an aircraft and then the pilot says, fasten your seatbelts because we're going to have some really bumpy rides. When you started out your firm, you're 7 people. Did you have that vision when you first started, or was it just maybe you and you were going to see where
initially it was just me, right? Partly because, I am a finance person. And I know how to run a P&L and I knew what I had to do to create foundation. And look, entrepreneurship, people ask me, do I have any regrets in my career? And I will always tell you, my biggest regret is that I didn't do this earlier, right? Mm-hmm. For a variety of reasons, I just didn't realize I could have done this and been successful at it. But the nice thing about the timing I chose to do it is to set this up and build a foundation of a business, particularly business and wealth management. I had to be willing to make some sacrifices on the personal front, right? So I worked at firms like ACO and BNY Mellon, where compensation is a key component there. Let's be honest, right? And so to be able to make some sacrifices in being able to maybe not take as large a salary, reinvest in the firm, do the right thing in building the building blocks. What's been nice is today I'm reaping those rewards by setting things up properly. But to your point, it is like jumping out of a plane. It's a bumpy ride, but it's also my bumpy ride and it's my story. And for me, what I've learned over the course of my career is I don't mind being an entrepreneur. And it's interesting because I'm married to a corporate executive who has spent 36 years at the same company, and he loves being part of a big corporation. And we're very different in that sense. But what I've learned is that I'm really more at home and more comfortable in my skin with this approach of being an entrepreneur. And what I have been able to do over time is take more risk as I've gotten more comfortable.
Wow. What do you notice right now in terms of the work environment? Do you notice any trends right now with your own team as far as preferences for being purely physical or virtual, or to still have this hybrid approach? What's going to stick as a result of the pandemic?
I think the thing is, and I was saying to you before the show started, I'm probably the only lunatic who signed a new lease during pandemic. We're moving in the next couple of months to a really great space, partly because as a business owner, I could get a better space today than I could have 3 or 4 years ago because there's less competition. But I think it's more about philosophy about a firm. I think some firms will work very well, work from home. Some firms are very good at hybrid, some firms completely in person. But I think it's about culture. And culture is really important to me because some of the reasons over the years I've made changes in my career is I was a capability fit for the firm, but I wasn't always a culture fit. And so as I've built the firm and built the culture here, certain things to me were very obvious and easy to do. Like my firm is a diverse firm. We're female owned. We automatically are diverse, but I wanted to make sure that this diversity is continued throughout the firm. But the other thing that's important to me is finance is seen often by people, particularly when you're dealing with tax, that it's a number thing. And I do believe it's numbers, don't get me wrong. But I believe what we do is a bit of an art. It's a bit about like being a sculptor, right? Because there's the financial rules, and then you've got to take the psychology of the client and sculpt those rules to move them to a better position. And I bring that up because I have found being in person and having collaboration is really important. And I want to have a culture here where I'm focused on training the younger generation. Right. And I learn a lot from them being here. I mean, don't laugh, but I grew up with my HP 13 calculator. And then when I asked them how to do something, half the time they're going on YouTube. And I had never thought of going on YouTube to learn like how to do something, a calculation. I'm like, who does that? Right. So I like having the younger people around. I love being collaborative. I love being able to teach. But for me, it's a culture decision. So we do things here that might not happen at other firms. Like, for instance, as we're talking this week, this is the last day of performance reviews. And I really feel strongly about having a strict performance review once a year that's predictable and consistent with my team. So those types of things. So it's a culture fit. And I think we're going to find different people doing different things. And we have to accept there's nothing wrong with that. I think as an industry, the discussions we need to have about this is work from home right, is hybrid right, but it's how do we create secure environments for clients, meaning from a cybersecurity situation, if you've decided to be work from home or hybrid and you have your team with sensitive data in their household, how do we protect against a cyber breach? How do we protect against information getting in the wrong hands? Those are the discussions I think the industry needs to have, not whether it's work from home the right thing.
That is really huge right there. I love the fact that these conversations get recorded because that is something that I'm going to put on play and hit again and rewind and hit on play. And on my phone, I think you are absolutely, absolutely right. But I've been guilty of is it a work from home? Is it a hybrid decision? And whereas you're looking at it from the culture perspective, which is what starts to happen as a natural byproduct. We're having similar discussions with our team. Where do we want to be located? Do we want to have a concentration in Philly? Do we want to have a concentration in New York? Do we want to work virtually? Do we want to work hybrid? If we want to work in Philly, where do we want to work for how many days a week? and who wants to go there and who's willing to travel, because it's a different dialogue, right? It's a different dialogue in the suite, Megan, that, hey, are you comfortable doing this particular thing? We never had that happen, you and I. We signed up for a job and it was like, you report at this time, at this day, and that part is a non-negotiable.
Exactly. But I also think one of the things the industry needs to think about, right? Like we do a lot of discussion in the industry about diversity, right? And look, I mean, to be direct, right? We are an industry that is heavily male, heavily white male, right? It's not uncommon. But I think one of the challenges I sort of think through in the back of my head with having a diverse firm and continuing to create diversity where everybody from different backgrounds can feel comfortable is sometimes, and I think about this as a woman, it's better to be in the office together because as a leader, you can pull certain people forward, not to pick gender stereotypes, but women tend to want to be perfect before they put themselves forward for the next job. And I think a lot of times we have to pull women to say, okay, you are ready, like go for it. But I think it's also coaching to say to someone, having them in person to say, okay, let's pause for a minute and let's see what you have to work on before we move to the next job. So I think as you think about work from home, hybrid, work in the office, some of these things in terms of culture, diversity, they're going to be key aspects to how the firm makes a decision on that.
Do you have any advice for firms that want to be and want to now lean into diversity? It's a topic that we've been hearing about. I think, though, that the industry is ready to be more action-oriented around the topic. And so sometimes a new hire will look at an environment. There might not be anybody that looks like them, feels like them. And so for some people that even as we approach to create this more well-balanced approach to our teams, do you have any advice for those firms?
Yeah, I wish I had like some sort of magic formula, right? I think it's hard. I think it's about self-awareness. And what I mean by that is we all tend to hire someone who's like us. And I have that in my firm, right? There are certain team players and I'm like, oh, they're my mini me, or they're me at 27. Like I know that. And that's the thing is, I think it's in going forward, when you think about filling roles in your firm, it's interviewing a large group of people, right? Picking people to interview to see, because sometimes someone's resume looks like they'll be a perfect fit, and then you get them in person and it's not. And then you have other people who are great fits, but their resume, you might not have originally thought they'd be the right fit. So I think it's a little bit of being self-aware that we tend to hire people like ourselves. And then I think it's also having a group of different people do the interviewing at your firm. So even when I'm hiring on the tax side, I have somebody from the investment team interview with them, right? And really, I am just trying to make sure we're thinking about it from a lot of different angles. And I think it's just really trying to be conscious. And so there's no magic formula, but that's sort of what works. And I will say I'm at an advantage, right? I'm a female-owned firm and I'm in San Francisco. This is a diverse city. It's a city that it takes pride in its diversity. And it's not that it's easier, but I think it's just creates a better opportunity set overall.
Yeah, for sure. You named your firm Chequers. That was another thing I've been meaning to ask. Why Chequers Financial Management?
Why Chequers? Yeah, I'm a history geek, right? Like I read history as a history major, which is obviously the path to tax, right? So
obviously,
I think the thing is Yeah. So it's funny because when I was thinking about how to name my firm, I went right to historical things. And there was one name it was between two names, but one was actually already taken, but it was the name of a battle that Henry V fought in. So, but I ended up picking Chequers because Chequers is a home in England. It's actually today, it's the Prime Minister's second home, right? So the Prime Minister lives between 10 Downing Street and Chequers. But back in the 12th century, the Chancellor of the Exchequer of England, who was the CFO, had built a house called the Chequers House, and it passed for 800 years through family wealth transfer. Okay. And then we got to the early 1900s and things were changing, right? We were going from a period of time where it wasn't just going to be family wealth that happened, but you were going to have people that rose through society to become self-made. And so the couple that inherited the house was American and they didn't have any heirs. So they gave the house to the British government because they felt in order for these self-made men and women who were going to rise in society, they needed to have a place to entertain, to be able to work within the British aristocracy. So to me, Chequers represents family wealth transfer and self-made wealth. And if you were to look at my practice, I have a lot of self-made wealth. I tend to work with corporate executives or entrepreneurs where they're sort of the G1s. They're making the big wealth. And a lot of the work we do is wealth transfer from G1 to G2 to G3 through intricate estate planning techniques. And so I feel like it's a very reflective name. And when British people see it, they always laugh. They're like, I know what Chequers is. And Americans are always like, Chequers? Like, cheque? Like, what are you saying? So it's one of those things.
That's a fascinating explanation. I would have never guessed that. You did undergrad in London as well? Did you study in London?
Yeah, I went to Bryn Mawr College. I went to a women's college, which is sort of odd because there's so few women's colleges. But I did do my junior abroad in London because I was a British medieval concentration. And then when I graduated college, I then went to China because I was a modern Chinese history concentration as well. So medieval British, modern Chinese, really there's no tie between the two. But I was just two places I was really fascinated with.
Okay, so now I have to ask you the big tax question. Take us from London to Shanghai to San Francisco now. How did you get here?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I think it's because I went to a law school that basically required you to take tax. So it's interesting. When I was in China, I was applying to law schools and I had a number of acceptances, but I'm from the great state of New Jersey. And so Rutgers was pretty aggressive in recruiting me. And I was going to law school at that period of time, right where the student loan crisis was starting to spiral, right? And when you looked at tuition, Rutgers was a great law school with a really competitive tuition. And so they ended up recruiting me. And then they said, oh, one of your requirements is you have to take personal income tax. And I remember the first day I went in there and I'm like, oh, I don't want to take tax. Tax sounds boring. And then we read the Dubenstein case, which is a famous case on gift tax. And I remember all of a sudden it all clicked. And I was like, oh, this is a puzzle, right? Like everybody's into Wordle today. Well, Wordle's like tax, right? Because tax, you have the rules and then you have to fit them to the fact pattern to make them work. So I sort of was like, this is amazing. I love this. Took gift and estate, took all these different tax classes. And then in being recruited, I interviewed with a number of firms and a number of tax firms, right? So I looked at going the private big firm practice route and working in a tax practice. I looked at Arthur Andersen, and it dates me saying that, and PwC. And then there was this firm called ACO that also did investing. And I was like, well, I really don't know a lot about money. I really want to make sure I always have my own money. I knew that. My grandmother was really good with money. She had sort of taught me a bit about the stock market. And so I was like, okay, let me go there. And while I was there, literally 6 months, they were acquired by Goldman. And so it was one of these things where I did that and I enjoyed it. And one of the things that happened over the course of my career at ACO Goldman is I had different opportunities. And I think this is important for women to know is at one point I went to ACO and I was like, look, I really love what I do. I'm living in North Jersey. And I'm from South Jersey, North Jersey and South Jersey, two different states, same thing in California, Northern California, Southern California, two different states. I said, so I don't know if I want to stay in this area. And they're like, well, where do you want to go? You can go to Atlanta, you can go to Detroit, you can go to Chicago, you can go to Dallas, or you can go to Irvine, California. And I was like, well, California, I mean, that's sort of the dream, right? I can always go home to Jersey. So I ended up getting moved to California. So I bring this up because I think for women in general, we're often afraid to raise our hands or say, this is what I want. And I do look back at being 28, 29, saying, I don't really want to live here, but I like what I do. And then taking a chance and moving to another part of the country. And it was a bit of a change. East Coast, West Coast, very different in a lot of different ways. I mean, it was like a foreign country. California it's a quirky state. And it's a fun state, but it was a big, big change. So I often say to people, don't be afraid to take risks. And I say that to women because I think a lot of women are afraid to take risks for a variety of reasons.
I'm a Jersey girl, so I can relate with so much of what you said. I lived in Jersey for over 50 years, born in New York City. And it's a big culture shock. Now I'm in Bucks County, PA. But here's the thing. I think that the women listening to this show, especially this particular episode, it is a great one. You can't expect a grand outcome of your life unless you make a bold decision and a bold leap. We want our lives to fundamentally change. And look, you were happy in a position. Gosh, you're a really super great company. I mean, opportunity of a lifetime. It did take a lot of chutzpah to ask that at such an early age. But it is a lesson I think we all need to, regardless of if you're entry level, mid, senior level, to just speak up. But you're speaking up from a point of saying, hey, I love what I do. This is what makes me tick. And if you want even the best part of me, give me an opportunity over here. What you were asking for wasn't crazy. We hear about, typically when we ask for things, it's always about salary negotiation. But you bring up something that's kind of been the theme of this episode unintentionally, and that is our wellness and our work environment. We do our best work when we're in an environment that suits us and that matches our culture and that allows us to thrive and make bold decisions.
Totally. And the other thing is taking risks. We look at it when someone changes firms or they launch something, but there's also risk in a career to decide to learn something new. And I've, over the years, have forced myself to learn new things to work with clients. I'm always amazed at all the different experiences I've had with working with clients. And it's really hard because in what we do, we can't advertise it. Like I can't talk about the type of work I do with different clients. But over the years, I've gotten into very intricate estate planning, from slats to grats to helping clients buy property overseas using holding companies, to looking at very intricate investments that a lot of times in wealth management, you don't really advise clients on. And that's been fun. And I've pushed myself to learn more and more stuff in my career because, again, it keeps it interesting. And one of the things I did recently is I became an adjunct professor over at Golden Gate Law. And what I've loved about doing that is, first of all, it's a lot of work, right? Creating a course, learning the case law again, forcing yourself to do the work and be able to lead a discussion. But I forgot how much it makes you relearn the key components of what you need to have to work with clients. So going through case law and talking about funerals and healthcare directives and selection of trustees and asset protection, going back and reading the cases and actually teaching it has actually made me better with clients. And I think that's the other thing is you've got to always be thinking about how can you make your practice better? And it's not just attending conferences in the space or meeting with people who are already in the space. It's going to do something different to have that juxtaposition against what you do on a day-to-day basis. And so people shouldn't be afraid in our industry to do other things outside that's very different from their day-to-day.
Hey, listeners, are you looking for actionable advice and motivation to get you through your day? Follow us on In the Suite Pod on Instagram. This week, we feature 9 questions to develop a growth mindset and the Eisenhower Matrix, which is a system to help you get stuff done and prioritize your work. Boss Business Academy said this is so helpful. Yes, delegation can definitely help us get more done. So follow us at In the Suite Pod.
You have some very intense conversations around estate planning, conversations around legacy planning. For the women listening right now to this episode, and some are financial advisors and some are not, when should women reach out to an advisor like you?
It's never too early, right? Like, it's so funny. Right before I came on this, I was getting texted by a client's daughter who's graduating from college, has a great job in the consulting field starting. And we've been talking about 401k and all that stuff because it's never too early. And I think the thing is, what I find is most women don't realize how much power they have in being proactive with their decisions. So I think for anyone out there who's thinking of working with an advisor, it should be someone who can help you very holistically, whether it's themselves driving the discussion or connecting you with the right people. But I always tell people investment management, having a portfolio, that's like one sliver of the overall pie. And it's an important slice of the pie, but it's not always the thing that is the biggest driver in the pie, right? It's one of many components. And so I really strongly encourage people to take control of their tax situation. Taxes are overwhelming. They're frustrating. You never feel like you're really maximizing, right? Especially now, since the TCJA in 2017, where things like itemization went away, people feel less like there's opportunity. So I think having a really good tax advisor who is proactive is incredibly important, because unfortunately in the tax is a weird industry, and I'll give you some insight into it, which is unfortunately for tax practitioners, people don't want to pay. Right? That you always hear people say, well, I'm only paying a couple $100s for someone to do my tax return. I will tell you, you get what you pay for. Now, there's a lot of people that a couple $100s for a tax return, that's appropriate. But there are a large portion of people who are working, dual spouse households, kids, who really need active tax advice. And if you pay for good tax advice, you will get that money back. It is an investment in your tax return, which, let's be honest, to be a functioning financial person in the US financial markets, you have to have a tax return, and it has to be accurate. And you got to not trigger audits unintentionally. Audits do happen, but you don't want to have them just because you're sloppy. So I would tell you, invest in someone who's a good tax practitioner, who's going to give you active advice and be engaged with you. And that's important because that also ties into your estate planning. And if you ask me what document all women need to have a healthcare directive. And I say this because women being pro-life, pro-choice is a big issue in women's lives, right? How do you feel on that issue? And it's about control of your body, regardless of which way you fall on that spectrum. Healthcare directives are about control of your body and the healthcare decisions you get made for you, whether you are incapacitated or after your death, what happens to your body. So to me, those two things that women deal with are tied together. And so if you have to have one document, get a healthcare directive. And anyone listening can do it very easily. Most states in this country, their attorney general's office will have a healthcare directive form on their website that you can download, complete, and fill out and make sure you have those decisions made. So those are the key legacy pieces. The last thing I'll say, Tina, because I know I'm talking way too much.
Oh, no, you're not. Please bring it on. Bring it on.
Is don't forget about legacy. I feel like I represent a very unique group of women. I'm married, but I'm child-free, and I'm child-free by choice, right? Some women are child-free by choice, some are by circumstance. But when you're child-free, it's very empowering because all of a sudden you don't have obvious beneficiaries. And so that allows you to sort of be more creative in your decision-making. So think about things like doing things for other people's kids. I don't know how many of my friends out there they're trying to save for college, but tuition is $75,000 a year, right? So if you have nieces or nephews or godchildren or close friends, you can do 529 planning for them, or you can make a contribution to their education. Or if there's a charity that you feel near and dear to your heart. So last year, I set up a scholarship at my law school. And it's a scholarship for a woman who's need-based, preferably from the county of Cape May, but I'm looking for any woman in New Jersey to help pay tuition. Charity is something a lot of women can do. And I find a lot of women love donor-advised funds, which is the ability to have your own charity under the umbrella of a larger charity, whether it's like a Vanguard, Schwab, Fidelity, Morgan Stanley, or a charitable foundation. The ability to have your own underlying charity to do things with is really empowering. And remember, I started with this with investing. Investing ties to all of that, but you want that holistic approach where it's not just what am I in stocks and bonds, but what's my tax situation? Where's my estate planning? How's my healthcare directive? Am I helping friends and family? And then donor advised funds.
And charity has a positive effect on your taxes, right? Like your ability to contribute and to give philanthropically through what you own is able, in some cases, to reduce your tax liability, correct?
in some cases. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 sort of muddied the waters here. So for all Americans, right, what happened was that tax law change mitigated the impact of certain itemized deductions, and in particular, state and local taxes, like your property taxes or what you pay to your resident state, if your resident state has a tax. But by doing that tax law change, what it did is it moved about 89% of all Americans to now use the standard deduction.
Right.
So now for most people, if they're taking the standard deduction, there is the ability to do an above the line charitable contribution of $300, but it must be cash. Okay. So to your point, you can do charity that way. For those who itemize, or for those who want to, what we call front load their itemization in a big income year, you can do charity to help lower your tax bill. But again, this is where working with a tax practitioner is key, because if you donate $2,000 to charity, right, and then you have a mortgage and you only get to take the $10,000 SALT deduction, you might not be itemizing, right? And so the benefit of charity isn't really helping you on the tax front. Not a bad thing. You should still do charity. But again, you need to really understand it with your own personal situation, because it's very nuanced.
And is it important that you work with a tax attorney, a tax professional, a financial advisor in your state?
Like I work with clients nationally. So my firm, like I have clients in New York and Florida and Texas and Colorado. So I work with people all over. But what you really want is someone who's skilled, right? So a couple things. On the tax side, you want either an enrolled agent, an EA, you want a CPA, you want a tax attorney who does tax returns, right? We're the group of people you want to be working with because you want to actually have us implement the preparation of your return, okay? But when it comes to strategy, that group I just mentioned is a great group to partner with on that. That being said, I don't want to shortchange other wealth managers. There are wealth managers out there who are more actively engaged on the tax front, who might be telling clients to do a donor advised fund. I will tell you, if you have someone preparing your return and someone advising you differently on the strategy, you have to make sure that you connect the two of them, because strategy and preparation are two different things. And if you didn't tell your tax preparer you donated money or donated appreciated securities to a DAF, how are they supposed to know unless you connect the two? And so that's what's really important here, is creating this constant conversation. And I'll tell you, I just had someone reach out to me yesterday or 2 days ago who wants to work with me. And part of the reason they want to work with me is their wealth manager sort of dropped the ball on tax loss harvesting and donating to charity. And now they went to their tax practitioner and they're like, no, you didn't do any tax planning. You're going to have a higher tax bill. And they were frustrated because there wasn't that connection. So it doesn't matter if you have one person doing it or two different firms doing it. You got to make sure they're connected.
That is really, really great advice. Fantastic advice for the women listening. We let life get in the way, and it's awful, but that's what's happened. That's what happens.
It does, but that's where I think when you're picking an advisor, what I always tell people, a lot of it's chemistry, right? Because you want to find someone that you feel comfortable like calling. Like it's a little bit like, and I'm sure that in the Me Too era, this is not the best analogy, but it's like the first time someone sees you like in a bathing suit or naked, you're like, wait, don't look, right? And that's the thing about like opening yourself up financially to someone. Like, I don't know how to explain how many wealthy, successful people I go to start working with. And they're like, don't judge me on this thing. I haven't done it yet. Like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. And I'm like, it's fine. Like, it's totally cool. We all have that stuff. But you have to have that chemistry to sort of connect with someone to feel that you can be vulnerable. And I say this because women in particular, I hear women talk about the fact they're like, oh, I've got this person I'm working with, but I just don't feel connected with them. Don't be afraid to interview a few people. Just because someone's the right fit for your friend or your sister or your brother doesn't mean they're the right fit for you. You've got to find someone that you have the rapport with, because let's be honest, you pay this person a lot of money to help you succeed financially. And I'll be the first to admit, I've had clients over the years. They are wonderful relationships. We're friends. I see them. I know everybody in the family. And then I've had situations where I haven't been the right fit for someone and we've had to go two separate ways. And it's okay. Because if you're not feeling the chemistry with the advisor, more than likely the advisor's not feeling the chemistry with you either.
Yeah, it goes back to your original, like knowing thyself. You clearly have a body of knowledge inside you. You've got a really great brain. You've got already, this has been such a fascinating discussion. I know that a couple of things here is that you publish a lot. You're a Forbes contributor. So anyone that wants to start to have access to these information, we're going to put all of the link in there. But you want to talk a little bit about your Forbes column. I like what you write about. You have a great writing style. It's easy to, not that you're like dumbing it down for all of us who aren't tax professionals, but you make me want to read because you understand, I think you understand women very well. I know that you work with women executives. Talk a little bit about the Forbes column.
Yeah. I think if, first of all, in a career, right, like you have to have some things that are for others and some things that are for yourself, right? And I think when you're client facing, there is an element of selflessness, right? That you have to be with the client. Like they call on Saturday mornings because it's the moment that they're panicked because they finally saw something because they were busy all week. Yeah. And there's part of you that has to be selfless about that. So I think as you age or get older in a career, you want to have one or two things that are really purely for you that are selfish in that sense. And so for me, it's doing the teaching and it's doing the writing, right? The writing makes me think through things. And also it's the ability to find connection amongst things or to explain things better. That's what I like. What is frustrating about writing is that the best, like the articles that I write that have like good advice for most people don't get as many hits. But if I write an article about what the wealthy are doing, which really impacts 1% of people out there, everybody wants to read that article. And so I really encourage people when they're looking at reading, and there's great personal finance writers from Kiplinger's to CNBC, to Forbes, but think about your own financial picture and try to think about what the advice you want to take that would be appropriate for you. Because when I have high net worth, ultra high net worth people coming in here and they're showing me something that's more appropriate for someone of a more mass affluent wealth level, I have to explain to them, you've graduated, right? You need to go upwards, right? Don't focus on some of this because it doesn't apply to you because the tax code doesn't work this way for you. You're not going to get the child tax credit. You're not going to be able to do this stuff. But you got to think about what you're reading. And so I try to do a mix of different types of articles to look for different types of readers because there's a lot of great advice out there. And I want people to do the right thing. And sometimes the right thing is really boring advice. So I hope that gives some insight into it.
Yeah, that is. And we're going to put a link to the show notes. You also have a couple of websites. Talk to us a little bit about the wealthintersection.com.
Yeah, it's funny, over the years, things have evolved. I've just become more of a commentator over the years. So that place is just a place that aggregates all the stuff that I do because I'm sort of all over the place. I do a lot of speaking. I am on a weekly investment podcast called the Money Tree Investing Podcast, which is a lot of fun, being on a panel talking about things. And then I've got my writing with Forbes and then being quoted in other articles. So I just want to have a good landing page for all the different stuff that I do. I think one of the challenges I have from a branding standpoint is because I'm technically deep in a lot of different areas, it is very hard to build a brand on that, right? Brands are much better if you're deep and narrow on one topic. My problem is, and I'm just being open about it here, is I like a lot of different things, but it's also because in my personal life and in my real life, I like to be involved in a lot of different things. I have a lot of different interests. And I think it's more, I went through a struggle in building a brand, and I say this to other advisors out there who are listening, where I wanted to be seen as a personal finance expert. And I got to a point where I was like, look, I'm trying to jam myself as like a square peg into a round hole. And it doesn't work for me. And so I would just rather be someone who is as quirky as I am with lots of different interests. And if people read me and people follow me, that's great. But I've got to have some enjoyment in the brand, and I can't pigeonhole myself a certain way. And that took time because it's frustrating because I feel like I have so much to give in personal finance advice, but it's hard. It's hard to build a brand. And Tina, you see a lot of different brands out there. You've built a brand. It's really hard to figure out who you are in it. And you just eventually have to find comfort.
Yeah, but you said the magic thing is that you want to be lit up. I see you on Instagram. I see you on Twitter. I see you on your website. I see you on Forbes. This is exactly the behavior, Megan, that I am shouting from the rooftops for advisors, for women, for anyone that wants to be seen, want to develop themselves as a thought leader. And it doesn't happen overnight. And it's not just the content that you create. There's that credentialed side as well. To your point, you're teaching a law class at Golden Gate University. You're studying each week. I'm writing a book, and this is for my personal branding chapter right now. And I'm just fascinated because you have a very strong personal brand. It was very easy for me to find you when I Googled you. And so there's a perception that it's so like, it's this mechanical process of operations. It's not there's no standard operating procedure for creating a brand. And yet I see you, what you just said, you're all over Schwab. You were the poster child. Okay. From someone who thinks that they don't do it well. Absolutely. I'll arm wrestle you over that. You're the poster child for Schwab Advisor Services. I saw a wonderful campaign and I applaud you on that, Megan, because as we are trying to create a more diverse industry, and that people see that campaign and you smiling and you being so fired up, you're just excited to talk about tax as you are about where you are with your husband. That I know.
No, yeah, that's true. And Schwab has been great, right? They've been really great at giving a platform. And trust me, when I use you as a vendor, I am very difficult as a client because I want to provide my clients with very high touch service. So I do give I feel like I know a lot of people at Schwab because I'm usually calling saying, we got to get this done. We got to do this. We got to be better. And they've been wonderful as an organization and being very, very, very supportive. And I will tell you, if you're ever going to be in an ad campaign, do it right before a pandemic because they ended up reusing my ad campaign. And I'm like, oh, this is fabulous. I'm 4 years younger in that. So bring it on, Schwab. I love it.
That's fantastic. So what's the best way to follow your work? Where do we want to direct the brand focus right now, Megan?
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Megan_E_Gorman. You can email me. You can come on my website, thewealthintersection.com, or at Forbes at www.forbes.com/Megan Gorman. And pretty easy to find. So reach on out.
I love it. I love it. Our last question, can you introduce us to a charity, a nonprofit, a GoFundMe, or a cause that you believe in and why? We too are trying to maximize our impact in the world, in the suite. I'd love to hear what that answer is for you.
I got two parts to this. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say the National Endowment for Financial Education. I'm a trustee at NEFI, and the programs that they put in place, the advocacy they're doing for financial education, and particularly financial education and diversity is really, really cool. So working with Dr. Billy Hensley is amazing. So that's a great organization. But on the personal front, my husband and I have focused on what is our philosophy in charity. And we both feel that food scarcity is something that really, I don't want to say it resonates with us, but it bothers us that there are people out there who struggle to eat. And so there's this great organization in Alameda County in Oakland, California, called the Mercy Brown Bag Program. And what it is it delivers fresh food, fresh groceries like vegetables and fruits to seniors who are subsisting only on Social Security. So I bring this up because, especially if advisors are listening, we all know a lot of people in this country have to take Social Security as soon as they can access it because they need the cash flow. But fresh food is hard to buy. It's expensive. And so the ability to support a charity that does these weekly deliveries to help these people live better and feel healthier is something that's near and dear to my heart. And it's run by a woman. Krista Lucchese is their director, and she's wonderful. So to me, it's a great charity to be involved with.
Well, I know that there are people listening in your area right now, and thank you so much for the power of your inspiration today. I'm so excited. I get to ride on a horse later and I'm going to be thinking about this episode, right? And you'll appreciate too, I moved over the state line to Pennsylvania just to change my tax.
3.07%, but you got a locality tax, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Locality.
Exactly. But it makes you, I was like, I have to let Megan know I moved because of taxes.
And by the way, there's this crazy treaty between Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So like you can live in PA and work in Jersey, but you pay the PA rate. Like that's the ultimate steal, right? So hopefully PA doesn't hear me say that, but New Jersey hear me say that. But yeah, no, and thank you for having me on. And I totally love the fact that, and I know this is going to date me as a Gen Xer, but we're like sort of both Lisa Loebing it right now with our glasses, right?
Exactly.
Like I remember in that video.
Exactly. I'm total Gen X and the world needs more of us because back to your earlier points of that, the next gen, my team is made up of millennials and Gen Zs. And guess what? And they love it. So we very much fulfill, I would say, a bridge to their future self. Well, Megan Gorman, thank you so much for today, for being our guest here in the suite. I applaud your work. We're going to share it with the world here, and we'll have all of the show notes or all of the links to everything we've talked about. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and weekend. Thank you so much for being here in the suite.
Thanks for having me, Tina. Take care.
You too.
You're listening to In the Suite, a podcast that shares amazing stories of women in business in the financial services and the wealth management industry. Our producers are Tina Powell and Kevin Hirshhorn. Our editor-at-large is Kevin Hirshhorn. Our content writers are Dimple Rashandani, Daniel Wheeler, and Tina Powell. Please let us know how you enjoyed this amazing episode with Megan Gorman and share your thoughts on social media #InTheSuite. You can connect with Megan on LinkedIn and visit her website at checkersfinancial.com. In the Suite podcast is sponsored by C-Suite Social Media, a high-growth digital marketing and social media agency for the financial services and the wealth management industry. You can visit csuitesocialmedia.com to learn more. And thank you so much for listening and subscribing. We've got listeners in 60 countries, 1,208 cities at the time of this recording. That number is astounding. We owe it all to you. So thank you. Feel free to email me, tina@inthesuitepodcast.com, to pitch guests for season 4. We've gotten a lot of them. And let us know who you want to see here in the suite. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to In the Suite.